All right, let's get right into it. Today, we're going back in time to 1947, to a really pivotal moment. We're going to unpack what the Indian economy actually looked like on the eve of its independence. So, after almost 200 years of British rule, India is finally independent. It's a huge moment. But what exactly did they inherit? What kind of economy were the new leaders handed? Let's start with a number that'll really hit you. In the entire first half of the 20th century, the country's overall economic growth was less than 2%. I mean, think about that. That's not just slow, that's pretty much a standstill, total stagnation. And if you thought that was bad, wait till you see this. When you look at per capita income, so what the average person was actually making, the growth was even lower, less than 0.5%. So for most people, their economic situation just wasn't improving at all. So this really sets the stage for our first big idea. The economy India got back in 1947 was, to put it simply, stagnant. So we're talking about an economy with practically zero growth. But here's something that's kind of wild. The British government itself never really bothered to officially calculate India's national income. Think about that. The most important data we have from that time actually comes from the tireless work of individual Indian experts, like the great economist V.K.R.V. Rao. He was one of the people doing the hard work to figure out what was really going on. Okay, so seeing how stagnant things were, you have to wonder, was it always this way? I mean, what was the Indian economy like before the British even showed up? So let's jump in our time machine and go back to the pre-colonial era. And believe me, the picture we're about to see is completely different. You see, before the British, India had this reputation for being a prosperous, self-reliant economy. Now sure, it was mostly an agricultural society. About 2/3 of everyone worked in farming. But, and this is a huge but, it was also a global powerhouse in manufacturing, thanks to its world-renowned handicraft industries. We're talking about incredible textiles like cotton and silk, intricate metalwork, precious stones, stuff that people all over the world wanted. And the key word here is quality. These weren't just everyday goods. The textiles coming out of India were basically works of art. The craftsmanship was on another level, so fine that kings and queens across the globe wanted them. And for a perfect example of this, look no further than the legendary Dakai muslin. This stuff came from Bengal, and it was famous all over the world. They even called it Malmal Shahi, which literally means royal muslin. That name alone tells you just how prestigious this fabric was. So the big question is, how do you go from that, a prosperous, world-famous economy, to complete stagnation? Well, to answer that, we have to get to the heart of what colonialism was really all about. Historians often point to one specific event as the turning point, the Battle of Plassey in 1757. This is really where British rule begins in earnest, and it kicks off a massive, 200-year-long transformation of India's entire economic structure. And let's be super clear about what we mean by colonialism. It's not just about one country ruling another politically. The key part is that the ruling country gets to control the economy and, well, rig the system to benefit itself. And when it comes to British rule in India, the main purpose was, without a doubt, economic. The whole game was to turn India into what you might call a feeder economy. Basically, India's job was to supply cheap raw materials for Prince factories and then serve as a guaranteed market to buy back all the finished goods. It was all about exploiting India's resources to power Britain's own industrial revolution. And this really shows you that power dynamic. None of the policies they put in place were ever about developing India for the sake of Indians. Nope. Every move was calculated to reshape the economy in a way that would benefit Great Britain. So let's take a closer look at how this all worked in practice. And there's no better place to start than with agriculture, because that was the biggest sector of the economy by far. It's where almost everybody lived and worked. Yeah, just look at this number to get a sense of the scale we're talking about. A whopping 85%. That's how much of India's population lived in villages and depended on agriculture for their livelihood. So you can imagine any policy that messed with farming, well, it messed with pretty much everyone. And the transformation was just stark. You can see the before and after right here. Agriculture went from being this prosperous, self-reliant engine to being stagnant and completely starved of any investment. I mean, get this. By 1947, India couldn't even grow enough food to feed its own people. So what caused this massive decline? Well, a huge part of it was a new land policy called the Zamindari system. Here's how it worked. The British basically appointed intermediaries, these zamindars, who were tasked with collecting rent from the farmers who were actually, farming the land. So, how did this one system manage to just suck the life out of agriculture? Well, it's pretty simple when you break it down. The farmers work the land. Then, the zamindars come and collect really high rents from them. Then, the British take their cut from the zamindars. But here's the kicker. With everyone just focused on extracting as much cash as possible, nobody, not the British, not the zamindars, and certainly not the farmers, had any reason or any money left over to invest in making the land better. No irrigation, no new techniques, nothing. And that wasn't all. On top of the zamindari system, farmers were being pushed to stop growing food for their families and instead grow cash crops, like cotton, that were needed for factories back in Britain. You combine that with a total lack of investment in basic stuff like drainage or flood control, and you end up with an agricultural sector that was just incredibly fragile. Okay, so let's pull all this together. What does this all mean? What was the actual legacy left behind in 1947? This is really the state of play for India on day one of its independence. You have a crippled agricultural sector. You have an economy that was built from the ground up to serve another country's needs. India wasn't even self-sufficient in its own food. This was the incredibly tough starting line from which the new nation had to begin building its future. And that leaves us with a really important thought. This was the starting line. So the question we have to ask ourselves is, how does this legacy, this foundation of stagnation and dependence, still echo through India's economic story today?